Hi and welcome. Today's video is actually the first video about books, because first one was just an introduction, and today we'll be talking about all the books I've read this winter. So a winter wrap-up. It's going to be 25 books, nearly rounded up to 25, because I read a bit more, but some books I haven't finished and they're just not worth mentioning. Some books are in Ukrainian and not likely they will ever be translated into English, so we'll just skip those as well. So yeah, 25 great books, mainly. And some of those, just a few of those, they have that rare quality for a book that you feel yourself a different person after you finish the book. You're not the same person as before you started reading it. There will be just a few of those in this video, but in general, the books I read this winter are pretty great. So cannot wait to share them with you. In December, I've read 7 books, actually 8, but this 8th book, the first one in December, it was a Ukrainian book for copywriters beginners. And I have no idea why I got that book in the first place. I'm not a copywriter. I don't write text at all. I don't write. Writing is not really my thing. But I even read it. No idea why as well. It was boring. I had no idea what to do with that information and I don't even remember it. Anyway, the second book I read this month was one of the greatest books I've ever read in my life. I think you can guess what book it is if I tell you that it's the first one in a series. It's an epic fantasy from a very famous, popular writer. This was the book that I wanted to read as fast as possible just because it was so interesting, so engaging, and at the same time I was stretching it to read it as slow as possible just because I didn't want to finish it. I didn't want to say goodbye to this book. I'm talking about The Way of the Kings by Brandon Sanderson. I've read it in Ukrainian and it's another great thing about it, that translation was just so good. I prefer to read books in English if they were written in this language, but sometimes I try the translated ones. And this is the case when translation, I'm not sure, I haven't read it in English yet, in original, but I think the translation is even better, which happens almost never. The great thing about translation of The Way of the Kings is that I didn't feel that it's a translation. It felt so natural. I fell in love with the characters, with how the world is built in this book, with how easy and how enjoyable is the process of reading it. I'm pretty sure you know what it's about, especially if you're a fantasy fan. And it's very difficult to explain what it's about because there are just so many characters and their locations, everything is set so far apart. I don't even know how they will be connected in the future, the way it will be possible. From the very first page you get that it will be very epic. This is the best fantasy book I've read since The Song of Ice and Fire. This book restored in me this faith that fantasy can be great. Because before I read last year, I read a lot of romantic fantasy, and it was just okay, yeah. And I didn't consider myself a fantasy fan, but after this book, yeah, I am a fantasy fan. Okay, the next book was Lessons in Chemistry by Bonnie Garmus. And I think it's a great story. It's a great book. It's well written and very empowering, very feministic. But I gave it 4 stars because I think it was a bit too much. At the beginning, I loved this story. It's a story about a female chemist in America in 50s or 60s and just how difficult it was for women back then and about what it took to get where we are now, even though it's also not perfect. But still, all the male characters in the book, they're just disgusting. I don't know, there is no one decent male character. And it felt like, yeah, she was too smart, too beautiful, just too much, just too, So that's why 4 stars. But I think it's a great story. I know there is a movie or even a series, but the book was enough for me. I don't really want to watch it, even though, yeah, the story is great. Next one is the book that broke my heart and put it back together in one night. I read this book one evening, yeah, one night. It took my heart. It took my breath away. It Ends With Us, Colleen Hoover. And this is the greatest romance / social drama I've ever read. I've never felt much empathy to the women who went through, how I used to put it before, is that women allow themselves to be treated like that. I'm talking about home abuse. I'm talking about women who were physically abused by their husbands or in general family members. This book gave me such an insight to what it actually feels like to be in this position, and why would women allow it to happen and keep living together with husbands like this. Friends, Lovers and the Big Terrible Thing by Matthew Perry. Before I started reading, I've heard that you must be ready that Matthew Perry is not Chandler Bing, and that this book is quite disturbing. And yeah, if you want to read this book just because you're a Friends fan, I would not recommend it. This book is written by a man who suffered all his life from different kinds of addictions. And at the beginning he mentions that it's probably due to mental problem. I don't remember how it's called, mental problem. And it's somehow justified by hormonal, I don't know how to explain, but it's some kind of disease that was the cause of this behavior. But it was very difficult to read. There is so much pain in there. It traumatized me on some level. I give it 3 stars. If you haven't read it yet and you're going to, then be sure to read all the trigger warnings and just be ready. It's a very difficult book to read. The next one is A Christmas Pig or Piglet. I'm not sure I'm saying it correctly. It's another children's book by John Rowling, a Ukrainian edition of it. It looks exactly the same like an English one, but in Ukrainian, and I loved it. This is what I expected from the best children's book writer. It's no Harry Potter, of course, but the story is just so magical and so engaging. It's about a boy who lost his stuffed piglet, I don't know, and he got a new one, the same, looking exactly same, but of course it's not the same. And that new pig took him to the world of lost toys to look for his lost piggy. Doesn't matter how old you are, I'm almost 30 and I love this story. I cried at the end. I really recommend you to read this story, especially if you have kids. My son is only 3, so he wasn't really interested in it as there are not many pictures. There are some very nice illustrations there, but for older kids, starting from maybe 5, 6, it's a great book. The next one is, I should have mentioned it before because it's a sequel to It Ends With Us. The book It Starts With Us by the same writer, Colleen Hoover. And this is basically just the second part of the story. If you didn't have enough of these characters, and I'm telling you, if you like the characters in the first one, you're gonna want to read the second one as well, just because you want that happy ending, right? But the second one was still great, but just not as powerful as first one. I gave it 4 stars, I think. But they should go together. And the last book of December is the one that I was finishing on New Year's night, just because I didn't want to drag it into the new reading year and I wanted to leave it in 2023. It's The Rainmaker by John Grisham. I know that John Grisham used to be very popular in 90s, correct me if I'm wrong, and still there is a new book that has been recently published. This is the first book of this writer I read, and I don't think I will continue reading books of John Grisham just because they are quite, I cannot say boring, but yeah, a bit boring. They are marketed as plane books, right? The book that you can read on the plane, but honestly, it's a bit too boring for the flight. There is a lot of... this book is about a young lawyer who just graduated and is trying to navigate in this world full of lawyers and how to find himself there, how to find a good job and how to make a name for himself. And it was okay. Why I was finishing it on New Year's night. The last 100, I think, pages of the book is about the process in court, the culmination of the story, and that part was really interesting. But everything before that, I gave it 4 stars just for the ending. January reads. The first one is the book called Lake. I'm not sure it actually has been translated into English. I'll check and put the cover here if it was. It's the Slovakian thriller mystery noir. I read it in Ukrainian and it was the first ever Slovakian book to read. And honestly, it was okay. It was a bit confusing to deal with all these Slovakian names. It was sometimes just, I couldn't follow the investigation. And when they were close to solving the mystery and they finally found who did that, at first I couldn't understand who that person was at all. So it was a bit confusing, but I like the characters, so it was 3 stars. It deserved its 3 stars. Next one is a non-fic by a Ukrainian writer. It's called The Theory of Impossibility. It's 70 stories about everything in this world, from flights to Mars, when it will be possible, to plastic pollution, to dinosaurs, and that we picture them wrong. It's one of my favorite Ukrainian writers. He's not popular abroad. I want his books to be translated into English because I think he has just great potential to be popular abroad. This is how he looks. He's very handsome. And I want to read everything he writes. He's just great. His name is Max Kidruk, if I forgot to say. Next book was Yellow Face by Rebecca Kwan. And you probably know what it's about. Yeah, it's about white American woman who stole a workbook written by her friend. They both American, but her friend was of Chinese origin. And the book itself was actually based on Chinese history. And this main character took it, edited it, rewrote it a little bit and published as her work and what it led to. And my advice to you, if you haven't read this book yet, read it with someone who you can discuss it with. I was reading it alone and just from time to time I had to shut the book and talk to myself, just to my dog, because I had so many thoughts in my head. I had to let it out. It's a great book for a discussion club, for a book club. It was such an emotional read for me. Babel, on the other hand, is very different from Yellow Face. I read it this month and I'll leave a full review soon, maybe in a week or 2. Next one was Martian by Andy Weir. I know it's an old book and I know there is a movie. I watched half of it because it's just too long. I couldn't watch it for that long. It's a great story. I loved it. It's the main character, especially the main character with all this, with all his sense of humor and how he dealt with the situation. It was very interesting, especially the last 100 pages. I couldn't sit down. I was pacing and reading. It was so emotionally charged, so exciting. Next one is The Eye of the World by Robert Jordan. I kept putting off this series because I didn't think I would like it much. And yeah, it's actually turned out to be, for me, just okay. My main problem with it, that I think it was a bit childish. Like, it was written for kids. It's very detailed, it's also quite epic, and the whole world that Robert Jordan built is amazing. So many different creatures, magic, the characters, they all feel real. I mean, as characters. But I don't really want to continue it. I just don't feel like it. I don't know, it didn't happen this, the chemistry, the match. And it's such a long series. There are 12 or 14 of them. Oh, I don't think I will. Maybe I'll try to read the second book. And if they behave more like adults, because in the first book, yeah, the main characters, they're around 18, 19 or 20, but they behave like they're 12-year-old teenagers. Honestly, maybe I read too much of Romfant and I was expecting some heat or something, some emotions. But no, nothing like that. I don't know, maybe I'll read the second book and see if it gets better. But I gave it 4 stars. Yeah, it's a great book. But next one is Divine Rivals by Rebecca Ross, and I loved it. Just in the moment when I was reading it, I couldn't put it down. I physically couldn't put it down. It was so engaging. I was so emotionally invested in this book, I couldn't do anything else. But the thing is that the moment I put the book away, I forgot about it. I didn't have this desire to get back to it as soon as possible. It's just, I don't know why. It's a fantastic book. It's amazing. The writing style, it's so beautiful. The characters laugh. The war is actually quite realistic in this one. It's about, it's a love story of two young people, two journalists who are originally rivals because they're fighting for the same position at a newspaper. And they have this magical way of communicating. Wonderful story. But I don't know, the ending was also a bit anticlimactic for me, because it should have been very emotionally charged, the ending. Just all this action at the end. But it was somehow like very fast forwarded. We didn't see the details or emotions that should have been there. And I don't know, I gave it 4 stars. And I want to finish it, the story, and read the second book. I don't know how to explain why I feel this way about the book, because it's amazing, but. And the best book of this month was The Cider House Rules by John Irving. I also read it in Ukrainian, and again the translation was amazing. I remember at some point I was reading this book on a subway, and I was laughing out loud and crying at the same time in a train full of people who were looking at me like I'm crazy. This is how deep this book touched me. I never cry or laugh in public if I'm alone. But this time, I don't know, it's a story about an orphanage and a boy called, I don't know the English names of them, because Homer Well, right, was his name, and the doctor, the kind of principal, or how they called the big manager of this orphanage. And this is the period in history in America when abortions were prohibited. And this is kind of the main topic of the book, what it led to. Because the reason why there are so many kids in this orphanage, in the tiny little town, even a village in America, is because pregnant women were coming there to give birth and leave their babies there. It's seriously one of the best books I've ever read. It's a bit, it can be a bit disturbing, because all the physiological or because there are a lot of physiological and medical details, and the humor is quite dark. But I really recommend you to at least try reading it. And if you like it, it will be one of the best books you've ever read. February reads 11 books, or actually 14, but I will not mention all of them. 2 books I haven't finished, I DNF'd. And the first one is City Baker's Guide to Country Living by Louise Miller. It's a romance. For some reason, I expected rom-com. I read half of it, just because it's very easily written. It's mainly dialogues. It's a story about a girl, a woman, she's a baker. She works in some very fashionable club or restaurant in a city, and accidentally she sets this restaurant or the building on fire and runs away from this whole situation because she doesn't want to deal with it, even though from the very beginning we understand that she will not be held responsible for it. She will not have to pay for it. She will not be fired because she's sleeping with her boss. She runs away to this small town. She doesn't really like it, and she stays there. She's looking for a job there. The reason is because her pregnant friend asked her to. And the reason why she asked her to stay is because she doesn't want to deal with her mother-in-law by herself. I didn't like the way it was written, the way the characters were described. They were not described in any way, except at the beginning there was a size of clothes they wore and color of hair. Yeah, this is what we know about characters. Only around 40% in, I understood who will be the love interest for the main character. Good. The second book I DNF'd was Once Upon a Broken Heart by, I don't remember the writer. I was really intrigued by the annotation to this book, which said that young girl it's kind of a Cinderella story that a girl lost her father. She lives with her stepmom and her stepsister, and the guy that she's in love with, marrying this stepsister, she wants to stop the wedding. She runs to the demigod, or whatever it's called in this book, some kind of god, to stop it. And he stops it by turning everyone into stone. The only way to save them is to drink poison and turn into stone yourself. She does that. She saves everyone for love, of course, and she owes 3 kisses to that god, or something like this. You know, the nice fairy tale with some romance in it, but just the way it's written, I did not enjoy it at all. I forced myself to read up to 25% of this book, and then I decided it's not worth it. Let's move on to the books I actually liked. And the first one is Midnight Library by Matt Haig. At home we have this book in 3 languages. In Ukrainian I have ebook, and we also have book in English and in Japanese. My husband is Japanese, so he reads mainly in Japanese. And the reason? Because I read this book in Ukrainian and I liked it so much that I bought it in Japanese for my husband, and then he decided to read it again in English to compare it to the translation. It's just a great uplifting story about a woman who is very depressed. She finds her life unbearable and she decides to kill herself, but instead of dying, she finds herself in a library full of books where each book is an alternative version of her life. And there she finds a book of sorrows where she can explore each of her regrets in life and what went wrong and which of the possible lives would be the happiest. And first it was just very interesting observing all these lives and what would happen if she would do this in the past. But the ending is just so nice. It just, if you're feeling a bit upset, a bit blue, disappointed, again thinking about things that would happen if you would done something different in your life, read this book. And next one is the book I read twice in February. It's Anne of Green Gables by Lucy Maud Montgomery. I've never read this one before. I watched the TV show on Netflix and I loved it. But it was, when was it released? 2, 3, 4, maybe 5 years ago? The book is just so different from the TV show. The book is much better, much better. Look at the amount of marks I have. All these marks are on the moments when I either laughed or cried or both at the same time. I love the main character Anne and her attitude to life, to world, despite everything that happened to her. The TV show, on the contrary, is so... They added a lot into it, which was not in the book. They turned it into drama, that each episode, so much drama happening, so much cruelty, or... You know, the book is not like this. It's much more kind, and there are 10 of them in this series about this girl, Anne. And I want to read them all. Next is another book by Brandon Sanderson, but this one is very different. The Trust of the Emerald Sea. It was released last year, if I'm not mistaken, and it got the Goodreads Choice Awards in the fantasy category. My problem with this book, it's mainly my problem, not the book's why I gave it 3 stars, is because I was expecting something similar to The Way of the Kings, and this is very different from it. Brandon Sanderson is a master storyteller, yeah, but this story is more of a fairy tale. It's about a young girl who goes into the sea voyage to save her prince who got in trouble with a sorceress, something like this. So it's like a reversed fairy tale. Yeah, the princess goes to save her prince here. And the story here is told by one of the crewmates of the ship that she's traveling on. And it's very humorous. There is a lot of jokes and a lot of it's very special and unique, and I liked it. But sometimes it was a bit too much and kind of annoying. On the ship there is a rat that can talk, a zombie doctor, and things like this that make the story very storytellish. Actually, the book itself is very nice, interesting, but not my kind, not. Next 3 mysteries I read this month. First one is The Thursday Murder Club by Richard Osman. And the investigation here is conducted by the pensioners, is it a word? Pensioners, old people, who live in a settlement, in a tiny settlement in the countryside England. And Thursday Murder Club is the name of their club that 4 of them have. They gather once a week to think about some old unsolved cases. This is their hobby. And an actual murder happens in their settlement, and of course they will start to investigate. And it was very cozy. I loved the characters. I loved the way they were doing things. I liked the way it was written. But why 4 stars? Because mystery gets 5 stars from me when it's something like In the Woods by Tana French or the series by Robert Galbraith. So it must be very detailed, very psychological, with bits of thriller or something. You know, I love details. I love big fat books. The next one was Reykjavik by, I cannot read the names of writer, I don't remember them. It's actually the first Nordic mystery I've read. It's based in Iceland, Reykjavik, yeah, the capital of Iceland, logically, 1986, I think. And the investigator in this story is a journalist who's writing articles about a teenage girl that disappeared 30 years ago. She was working on a small island, and then she just left and no one ever saw her again. And when the country is this size, very small, the population, they all know each other. Things like this, news like this, it's a very big thing, especially that this case was never solved. So everyone knows about it, everyone knows her name, not what happened, but no one knows what happened. And in the middle of the book there was a twist that I didn't expect, and it really surprised me. So it's a good mystery, it's a good book to spend an evening or two. I also gave it 4 stars. And another one is Everyone in My Family Has Killed Someone by Benjamin Stevenson. The storyteller in this book is somehow similar to The Tress of the Emerald Sea. So the writer, the character of the writer, talking directly to the reader again. And he's writing books about how to write mysteries. So throughout the book there are things like on page 10, 50 and 90 there will be murders. And if there is some tense moment on page 77, for example, he says, no, pay attention, now page 77, and the next murder will be on page 90, so don't worry. So it's very humorous. And at the same time it was still a cozy mystery, because it's about a family reunion. Many people, one family go to the ski resort in Australia. By the way, in Australia there are ski resorts, did you know about that? Mysterious murders start happening around them, and they try to investigate it, and I really enjoyed the story. It was funny, it was witty, it was exciting, I don't know. And the ending, I would never guess what happened there. Even though the storyteller is trying to be very honest with the reader and give everything he knows, all his thoughts. If you're very smart, maybe you can actually guess or you can understand who the murderer is. I couldn't, and it was a big surprise for me. Next one is a comic book, or let's say graphic novel that I really enjoyed. It's a Ukrainian one about borscht. Borscht is a traditional Ukrainian soup, but we don't really call it soup because borscht is borscht and soups are separate. Here, let me show you the way it's made. It's very juicy, very yummy, everything in borscht colors. It's a story about the guy who is trying to make borscht for his girlfriend, and he is trying to find the perfect recipe. And turns out there is no one recipe for borscht, because in every region, in every even city, town, in every family, the recipe is different. In one region they use potato and onion. In the other region they don't use beetroots. In the third one they add cherries into it, and it's very different. So there is no perfect recipe. And I just really enjoyed the story. Next two books are the best of the best I read recently. First one is a romance by Irish writer. And when I heard about this book, I was interested not because of the plot, But because I was curious, how can you write a 900-page book, which is only the first part, second part is almost 1,000 pages, where nothing really happens? And this book has very high rating on Goodreads, 4.5 if I'm not mistaken, around that, with almost 100,000 reviews, I think, around 80,000 reviews, and it's almost 5 stars. And I was really curious, and the plot itself is just a girl that was bullied a lot in her previous school, moves to this new college. She meets a guy there who plays rugby professionally, and yeah, it's their love story. How can it be 2,000 pages with this kind of reviews? But the name of the book is Binding 13, and it's only the first part in the series. The first story is about Shannon and Johnny, right? Shannon and Johnny. And I got so crazy about this book that I'm now on the 4th book in the series. I don't know how to explain this. They are crazy long, almost 1,000 pages each book. And there is a lot of repetition of same things. We already know a lot of, these thoughts that they keep repeating in almost every chapter. But still, I was so emotionally invested in this first one that I read it in one day. 880 pages in one day. I couldn't sleep till 3 a.m. till I finished the book. It's just such a beautiful story, and it's not really smart, especially first book. It's a very slow burn, and it's more of a social drama. It's more of a drama than romance, because the main character, this girl, Shannon, she has a big family. They have 5 kids there, I think, and the father is a drunk, very abusive drunk, so he gets handy with everyone in the family. And at school, this girl is being bullied a lot, like a lot. So she's very small, very skinny, very shy, very scared. And the guy is actually the opposite. He's from a rich family. He is a professional athlete. He plays rugby. Yeah, he's a professional rugby player. And with him, it's the opposite thing. He doesn't know life. His whole life is just rugby. His mind is always on track. He has a plan for everything. And when they meet, just if you like romance, you would love this book, I think. Just if you read it, let me know what you think. And the best book of this month was Beautiful World, Where Are You? By Sally Rooney, Irish writer. And this is the first book of hers that I read. And also it took me a day, an evening, to read this one, because, I don't know, this is the book that I felt, sometimes you read a book and you feel like you disappear from our physical world, and you are just there in the book. You don't feel anything. It might be very cold, very hot, mosquitoes eating your legs, or you're lying down in a position that you don't feel your arm anymore or something, and you don't feel it at all. The hunger, thirst, nothing. You're in the book. This is what happened to me. I felt so connected with the characters of this book. And if you ask me about the plot, what it's about a group of friends, 3 friends mainly, who live either sometimes together, sometimes separately, sometimes they don't see each other for a very long time. And it's just about their life and the way they talk to each other, what they talk about. And the style here, the writing style, is very unique, because the dialogues, they are not being separated from the main blocks of the text, and it all goes together. And I really loved it. Somehow at some point I stopped noticing it, because I was swallowing this text, I didn't see words. I saw pictures, something like this. Finally, we're done with 25 books. 25 books is a lot. Thank you very much for watching. If you like the video, please hit the like button and subscribe. Would be very grateful for your support, and see you in the next video.